you didn't know, I'm doing a book review marathon. I've already done 2 before. I actually don't even know when I'm going to post this one, but it is the culmination of Karen M. McManus's One of Us is Lying trilogy. So it's got to get done because that's how I am. Well, for the most part. There are some series that I just gave up on, but this one actually, well, this one is One of Us is Back. Let's just put that out there. I liked One of Us is Lying. I thought One of Us is Next was a waste of my time. Like, the plot of it was so underwhelming, or at least the big reveal was so underwhelming. I liked The Cousins. I mean, The Cousins has nothing to do with any of this. But so far, I have been lukewarm about her writing. I thought that her plotting, like, I think her writing is actually good. She's a very intelligent writer. But there just tends to be things here and there that take away from her genius. When it comes down to it, this was my favorite book of the series. I was disappointed by the way it ended. I wasn't necessarily disappointed by who the suspect or who the culprits were, but I thought the ending was kind of wishy-washy. One of Us is Back. Again, it picks up with that same theme that started with One of Us is Lying. It combines characters from One of Us is Lying and One of Us is Next. In this book, we have Nate, Bronwyn, Cooper, Addie, Maeve, Phoebe, Knox. And then we have Jake Reardon, who was the bad guy in the first novel. 2 other characters, a guy named Gavin and a girl named Eva. Of the main characters, of the characters from the Murder Club, the 3 that have perspectives are Nate, Addie, and Phoebe. When I started the book, because I didn't like One of Us is Next, I was ambivalent about Phoebe having a narrative perspective because the other 2 are from the first book. They were the originals. I just really didn't understand why we needed to have Phoebe because her story was a very loose affiliation with the first novel. And so I was like, why is she now part of the Murder Club? But, I mean, if you haven't watched those reviews, you need to. Or if you haven't read those books, you need to, because even I, who have read them and reviewed them and recorded them and posted them for you, I could not remember who was who. If you have no idea about this world at all, you will be confused. What tied Phoebe in and made her matter was the fact that her brother had been a guilty party in One of Us is Next. The truth that she learned about him was what was eating her alive here and affecting her relationships. And it kind of drove some of the events. It is 2 years after the events of the first novel. The original Murder Club members are home for the summer vacation. And Jake Reardon, I didn't tell you here, I told you in my previous review that it's been probably 2 weeks since I finished these books. Just by nature of how my life works, I did not have the time to sit down and review them right away. I can't remember if Jake was actually on parole or if he is up for parole and therefore he is able to kind of be a free man, like he doesn't have to stay in jail. Whatever the reasoning is, he is free. He's walking the streets. He does have his ankle monitor. He apparently does have like a guard with him, making sure he's doing what he's supposed to be doing. In a sense, he's doing this community service in which he travels around to schools and he talks about his experience. He's talked about what he's done. He's talked about his rehabilitation, and he is an upstanding member of society. A point that I thought was really, really interesting is that when this all first happened, everybody hated Jake. But now, because he's going on the school tour circuit, there's undoubtedly going to be probably a majority of people who are sort of going to forget the initial events and they're going to start to sympathize with him. So all these people who it could have been like an impartial jury are now going to be a biased jury and not in favor of the murder club, but in favor of Jake, because how could such a nice guy, an upstanding inmate, how could they possibly let him stay in jail? But now the threat of Jake looms over the murder club's heads, because very early on we drive past a sign that says essentially the game is afoot, like something is going to happen. We have the physical Jake, the presence of him, and not knowing really what his game plan is. And then we have the idea that something bad is going to start happening again, and Jake could be the one behind it. Let's see. I'm just so tired, and these books are so intricate, but there's no way I could refresh my memory to the extent that it needs to be to really get into it the way that I usually do, but that's probably for your benefit. Let's just go with the fact that 4th of July is coming up, and Nate, he lives in this dump with a number of other people. There's this one roommate in particular, Reggie. He takes advantage of women without claiming to take advantage of them. Like, he never has to take responsibility for what he's done. But recently he filmed himself and another person doing things, and this other person had no idea that it was being filmed. All the roommates are voting as to whether or not he should still live with them, because they're also strapped for cash and it's not a good time. Like, you know, they're in the summer, like, how are they gonna get another roommate? They're like, yeah, you know, like, let's keep him on. Bronwyn, who is still dating Nate, is the instigator of all of this, because even though she goes to Yale, she's not close by, yet she is the one who's like, well, we need to have like a roommate meeting about this dude. She and Nate are upset, but blah 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 blah. 4th of July is coming around. They always have a 4th of July party at their house, or I guess Nate has a 4th of July party at their house. Phoebe has been really struggling with her secret about her brother. She did attend one of these school functions where Jake was talking. Now her friends are like, what's going on with you and why are you lying to us? So she is just like, look, I'm a mess. Whatever, I'm getting out of here. She walks away from them. Nobody tries to stop her. So she's kind of on her own, because these people don't have friends except for each other. And I think it's really interesting how when you're on the inside of something, you feel important and you feel exclusive. But then once you look at this from the outside, so like when she walks away and people are asking her why she's not with the murder club, it's like, oh, that they're kind of a dumb little group. Like, who would want to be part of something called the murder club? Why are they so special because they had this happen to them? They're nothing special. But whatever. She goes off and gets really drunk. There's a moment where you're like, oh my gosh, this roommate is totally gonna take advantage of her. It doesn't happen, but what does happen is she somehow gets drugged and she's then kidnapped. Nobody knows what happened to her because she'd had a fight with them. Then the mother calls one of the girls and says, hey, do you know where Phoebe is? She's not answering her phone. I haven't heard from her, but she was supposed to have stayed at your house. And the girl's like, no. And no, she wasn't supposed to stay at my house. So we get the distinct impression that whoever kidnapped Phoebe texted the mother, misled her so that Phoebe's disappearance wouldn't be so concerning until it was kind of too late to be concerning. We jump into Nate, who his father, we've met his father before. His father is a recovering alcoholic and they are repairing their relationship. The dad comes to his house after the 4th of July party. The dad is like, I can't find my keys. So he's a janitorial worker of some sorts at the high school. He's like, I don't know where my keys are. Do you know where my keys are? And Nate's like, I do not know where your keys are. And then, actually no, I think he came over before that. So then after the 4th of July party, dad gives him a call and is like, you need to come by. Like, you need to see something. He and Addie, I believe, show up at the school, and who would be there but Jake, because he used to play football, used to play baseball, so I guess he still keeps in shape, and so he will practice at the school baseball field. And it just so happens to be next to the shed where the dad had called from, because guess who the dad found? Phoebe. Phoebe is okay. She'd obviously been drugged, but she has practice written on her arm. And I gotta say, this is a really great lead up. What was concerning to me was not necessarily how soon Phoebe or somebody, like something happened, but how soon Phoebe was recovered. Because I really felt like this is where the book was gonna start. And that it was Phoebe was gonna be in some kind of danger, race against the clock. No, it just turned out that she had been abducted, and she apparently was practice for this abductor. The next thing we see on the sign is something about like, you know, there are new rules, and then I think something about, well, no, I don't even know. But so now the gang is like, what's happening? What are these new rules? What is this new game? Phoebe naturally suspects her brother because he is some kind of like tech whiz. And actually, I kind of liked his character. Well, I both loved and hated him because there was a lot of suspicion cast on him, and you didn't really know if there should be any suspicion cast on him. But given where we left off in One of Us is Next, it's kind of like, this kid could be the next Jake Reardon and Simon What's-His-Face. He could be incredibly devious at the age of 13, and because Phoebe and their other sister Emma had covered up for him, like, they have just perpetuated the problem. What then happens is Reggie, the sexual assaulter, he goes missing. He turns up dead at the school in the boys' locker room. Addie postulates that it was actually an accidental death, but on his arm it says makes. They're smart enough to remember that there is a phrase called practice makes perfect. So they're thinking there's one person left. This culprit is practicing, and there's one person left. Who is that one person going to be? Of course, they all think it's Jake because Jake is roaming free for the most part. They go about trying to get information on him. One thing that Phoebe had remembered was this Vine wallpaper, and Addie, who used to date Jake, was like, oh my gosh, he has wallpaper like that at his lake house. They're driving up there. Jake catches them because they're not very good detectives. So they're never actually able to get into the house, although one of them does. Like, he doesn't notice one of them. That person takes a picture of this Vine wallpaper, and Phoebe's like, that's not it. What a good look, don't you think? I feel like a shark fin. Anyways, woven in and out of all this storytelling, it was my personal favorite part of the book. We had chapters from Jake and Simon Kelleher. I first didn't quite understand why we needed Simon, but then towards the end, he did become more relevant. But I really enjoyed these looks into these boys because it shed light on the first novel, but then it also made you more suspicious and wary in this novel. What we're getting here is how they essentially were growing apart, because around the time that high school was starting, Simon wasn't doing it for him anymore. Simon was a geek, and Jake wanted to do more, to be more, to explore different avenues, and he essentially wanted to be part of that popular crew. Simon is seeing these changes in Jake, and Simon is just a vindictive guy. He already has his hate list, at which point he adds Jake. All these people that were on the hit list or the hate list then became some of his victims in that first novel. But then we see Jake with the opposite perspective of Simon and how creepy he thinks Simon is, but he's not really sure how to get rid of Simon. We see Simon being something of a creeper, and how he overhears Jake and his dad talking, and they're talking about Simon, and this is when Simon just is like, I hate Jake. We see Simon eavesdropping on conversation between Jake's parents because his mother, so this is 5 years in the past. Jake's mother has become a bit more successful in advertising, and this has meant that her hours are longer, and so it changes the dynamic within the marriage. We see, should I spoil it? Should I spoil it or not? Well, we see the ways that Jake takes after his father, and then we see how volatile that his father actually is, how he's just a real malevolent kind of guy, but he's like a sociopath in the way that he's very charismatic, but you'll see those glints in his eyes or the things that he'll say that are not quite as kind as they are on face value. So I enjoyed seeing that because it created the depth and the suspicion that we needed for this novel. One thing that we learn about Jake's mom is that she indeed had been having an affair. We don't know with whom. And on some level, I wondered, is this a misdirect? Are the things that we're seeing and hearing indicative of an affair, or are they kind of similar to what an affair could look like, but they could mean something completely different? Which I don't think that's what McManus wanted my mind to go to, but that's where my mind went to, and it made it better for me because it made me start to question things and not immediately jump to certain conclusions. Yeah, she was having an affair. Big spoiler here. One, Jake is not the culprit. He's actually the third victim. Two, do you have any idea where I'm going here? Two, he is not actually his father's son. There was a moment, and this is when I started to question. There was a moment where he mentions how he doesn't actually look like his dad, but because their mannerisms are so similar, everybody says that they look alike. So what really had happened was his mother had fallen in love with somebody else in college. Apparently, at this point, she had gone pregnant. He had gone off and married someone else and started his own family, only for her to be like, what's up? I'm pregnant. Here's your kid. They decide not to pursue anything, not to really do anything about it. And then when she gets kind of big into advertisement, she starts working for his company. And this is the same company that owns that billboard that has been hacked. I guess we're gonna have to ruin everything from here. Maybe I don't have to ruin everything. The biological father ends up drowning. This just sets his family on a downward spiral. Here is a spoiler, a third spoiler, I guess, or a fourth, whatever number I'm on. Jake's dad had come home only to find the biological father there getting the mother's stuff because she's leaving him. And she had sent him to do it because for some reason they thought that it might go better. Like they didn't expect the dad to be there, or the husband to be there, but like if he did show up, it would be better if the bio dad was the one that encountered him. Because the dad is so hot-tempered and nasty, and this is all like Simon, it's just Simon's perspective. Simon is observing all of this. He gets rough with the bio dad. They all now are under the impression that he's killed the bio dad. Only for when Jake goes over, and Jake doesn't know Simon is observing all this because Simon is a little sneak thief, all right? Jake then, when the father leaves the room, Jake goes over to his bio dad, and the bio dad shows signs of life, and then Jake suffocates him. So now the assumption is that the dad, the father, and Jake take him to whatever body of water he was found in. Now let's come back to the present. Jake has gone missing. The murder club has started to wonder if maybe there's a connection between bio dad and his family and whatever's happening now. So they start trying to hunt down the kids. Their best suspect is up in New York acting in some third-rate play. I think there's another brother. I don't remember what was going on with him. But then there was a daughter, but the daughter has been in London at Oxford studying. And so they're like, who in the world could be involved with this? Meanwhile, we have met Gavin, who is Nate's co-worker. They both tend bar at the local country club. And then there is Evie, something like that, who is Phoebe's co-worker at Cafe Contigo. I'm here thinking Gavin, spoiler, he's involved, but he came out of left field. And this is kind of where I get disappointed. Evie, because I couldn't figure out if it was Evie or Edie. She is mentioned so often, and like Phoebe's falling apart, so Evie is constantly picking up her slack, and she's so perfect and blah, 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 blah. And I was like, who is this girl? I'm smart. I'm so smart. Like, I knew there was more. And, like, even though she was such a minor character, the amount of emphasis put on her in her interactions with Phoebe and, like, her work at this cafe, I was like, there's something to it. There is something to it. Turns out she is the daughter, Chelsea. She had created this completely fake profile to mislead anyone into knowing her whereabouts, only for Maeve, who is another computer genius, who some form or fashion had helped them in the first novel catch the killer, or, you know, the bad guy, using her, like, limited hacking skills. Like, I was expecting so much more from her. Anyways, she is still their go-to IT person. And she's like, I can't believe I got catfished. I got fooled by Chelsea into thinking that she was studying in Oxford, when what she did is she essentially stole someone else's life. And her biggest mistake was actually letting people follow her so that it looked like her profile was legit, because then these people realized this is not the right person. What had happened was that she had this vendetta against Jake. She never believed that her dad had drowned. She also had this thing about rich young guys getting away with things they shouldn't get away with, like Reggie. So his death was an accident. Like, she I think had tied him to a chair, and then his attempts to get out of his constraints, he hit his head and he bled to death. Phoebe wasn't her initial target. It was actually Vanessa, an old friend of Phoebe's, or an old friend of somebody from the first book. When Cooper, in the first novel, his secret was that he was gay, so that when that secret came out, she was totally gay bashing him. Eva / Chelsea was like, well, this person needs to learn a lesson too. But then what happened was that at the party, Phoebe had drunk Vanessa's drink. Chelsea takes her, but she was going to return her. It was going to be no big deal, only for Phoebe to reveal the brother's secret, which, if I know I've been very vague about it, is that he was the one who ultimately was in communication with the guy who was causing all the issues in the second novel. By hiding his secret, Phoebe was perpetuating the problem, and she was basically turning him into another Jake. So Phoebe, at this point, does need to learn a lesson. But the ultimate target was Jake. I don't exactly know what the intention for Jake was. There had been a point where Addie had disappeared. No, not Addie, Bronwyn. Bronwyn had disappeared. Nobody knew where she was. She was supposed to cook dinner for Nate and his dad, and now that nobody can get in touch with her, they're just thinking she's the third person, only for it to turn out like this was just so dumb. She was picking things, like foraging for things for the dinner. She found a river she never knew was there, and then her phone went into the river when she tripped or slipped or whatever, and that's why nobody could get in touch with her, because she didn't have her phone. I was like, anticlimactic much? But since then, they were like, hey, we need to memorize each other's numbers so we can call people without our phones, or like without the phone directory. The murder club, somebody found a yearbook photo that had Chelsea and Gavin in it. Now they're like, oh my gosh, somebody was with Gavin. We need to let her know that she's in danger. Nate catches up to them, only to get knocked upside the head with a tire iron. Gavin then sticks her in the trunk because she had memorized whoever's phone number, and because Nate had given her one, it must have been Maeve. It was not Bronwyn. It doesn't matter. Why am I even trying? He had given her one of his old burner phones from back in his drug dealing days. She uses this, and I'm assuming it's like a T9. So if any of you guys know what a T9 is, you know what kind of skill this is going to take from her. If you don't know what a T9 is, you need to go do some research. So she gets out the message that Nate is injured, and she tells them where he is. She is then taken because Gavin and Chelsea had been dating. He tells Nate and whoever this girl is, when Nate confronts him, that they had broken up. She had broken up with him, and that he had followed her to this city in order to try to stop her, only for him to be lying and bash Nate over the head. So in the end, he takes whatever girl this is to Chelsea's childhood home, because they still own this home, even though the dad has since died, the mother has died. They're essentially destitute, but somehow they still own this home because they had moved after the dad had died. And this is also where Nate is. So this girl is thrown into a soundproof room because one of the brothers used to play drums or whatever, so they'd had a room soundproofed. Actually, there might have been two. Oh, that's what it was. Phoebe had come to Evie/Chelsea's place because she thought that Evie might have some information. So Evie has actually already abducted Phoebe and has taken her to this house, and she's in the soundproof room. Whatever girl Gavin has is front and center to the big revelation. So the intent was for Chelsea to never harm any of these people, only to basically teach them a lesson. This is the whole revelation of like Jake's parentage and all these answers. I think it's Addie. She's noticing some of his expressions and how he's still kind of smug about things, and Chelsea has a gun. Nobody actually thinks she's going to use this gun, and Gavin's like, oh, that's not what's supposed to happen. Nobody's actually supposed to get hurt. And I'm like, but you just clocked Nate upside the head with a tire iron. Chelsea does shoot Jake, and she kills him. Then she and Gavin escape. This book is supposed to be the end-all be-all. So I guess we're never going to know what happens to Chelsea and Gavin, although I have a feeling McManus, her agent, her publisher, and or her fans are not going to let this one slide. Like, they're going to want a resolution. Jake dies. All of the murder club gang get together. This book, the purpose is for them to officially move on. Like, that's why this series has ended, because none of them are going to be holding on to the past. They're not going to be holding on to the events that have haunted them and kind of kept them tied to their hometown. When Gavin pulled out that tire iron, I was like, ooh, he's so evil. He and Chelsea are so evil. Only for them not to be evil. These books are so suspenseful, and in a way they're really scary, but then they're not. All that we build up to, the climax is more of a plateau. And it's always such a letdown. There is something with Nate where he's poor, like he has no money. Parents weren't great parents. They had their own addictions, their own demons. But Nate's father does come to him at one point and say, hey, this uncle that we don't really know about, or like you don't really know about, he left me land. I'm going to sell that land, and I'm going to give a couple $100,000 to you, Nate, because none of us would have ever survived if it hadn't been for you. You had to keep everything afloat, and you had to grow up faster than you should have. I was kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop, because it seemed too good to be true, because that's the seed that's always been planted, was you can't trust his parents, especially his dad. I know we're supposed to have that opposite perspective here, where like his dad really is trying. Like many other authors, I feel like she tried to do too much. She had too many things going on. The brother, Phoebe's brother, when Reggie died, the one thing nobody could find was his necklace. Turns out that Evie had planted it in Phoebe's brother's backpack when he had gone to the bathroom or something one day when he was eating at Cafe Contigo. This is a backpack he never leaves behind. He's super sullen, like he doesn't really open up. He's completely changed. He's just kind of creepy these days. Emma is across the country because she was like, I'm getting out of Dodge after the events from the second novel came to light. She has since come home for a mini vacation or whatever. Like Phoebe wanted her to come home. Phoebe finds this necklace in the backpack because the brother goes on a sleepover. He ends up, it's like an extended sleepover, but suspiciously he left this backpack behind. She finds the necklace. They confront him. He bursts into tears because apparently he's still just this sensitive, insecure kid at heart. So he's not the next Jeffrey Dahmer. Phoebe and Knox, they get together, and this whole novel had been this thing of like, they both like each other, but because of her secret, like she can't be with him. Talk about a stereotype. That's really kind of it. I think Jake and Simon drove the novel because they raised the stakes and they made us question exactly what was happening. I liked that Jake was a red herring. Like, I knew it wasn't Jake. It could not be Jake. That would be too easy. But I liked how he was the obvious suspect and it made sense. And if he had been the bad guy, I wouldn't have been surprised. But I enjoy the way that McManus weaves things, and she is a smart writer, if not always fulfilling. There we go. And I'll see you for another review next week. Bye.